Just getting stood up. Can you speak softer? I'm trying to do a speaker here, Nick. Speaker view.
Hello.
Mary, this is Maggie.
Hi, Maggie.
Can you get off and come back on? There's a problem. You're
Problem with, okay.
you're connecting to audio, but you can't hear us yet. And so you are on the full screen. So can you go off and come back on?
Sure, I guess so. Let's see, this meeting is being recorded. Leave the meeting. Let's see.
Leave the meeting.
Okay. Now it says Zoom.
Zoom. Well, click on the come to the meeting, join the meeting.
Where do I do that?
Didn't you get the email?
Yeah, I signed up already.
Yeah, well,
What? I've lost you, Maggie. I don't know what the problem is. I signed up. I got my number and so forth. But now that I said leave the meeting, it just becomes Zoom on here. I'll hit Zoom again, but it doesn't have the number. It doesn't have. It just says post attendee Zoom.
well, you have to go back to where you had the number.
Okay. All right. Why don't I just stay off so I'm not interfering with your
No, no. Go back to the where you got the email from
Yeah.
Jessica.
From Jessica. Okay. Get it from mail. Okay. Loading. Let's try that. See, I originally got it. Let's try new mail. I originally got it from new mail when I signed up. And then with my computer, I had to go back to old mail to click into it, which I just did. And that's what I did. All right, wait a minute. I've got it. Okay. Now what do I do?
So click on it. Click on it.
Log. Yeah, and it says log in to Zoom us and the meeting number and so forth.
Yeah, do that.
The meeting number?
Yeah.
I did that before.
Well, do it again.
Just did. Did it work?
Not yet.
Okay.
But someone was ahead of you, so just.
Okay. It says you can hit on this link, or you can log in to zoom.us.
Yeah, so which one did you do?
I did the meeting ID. And then it had passcode under it. I didn't do that. I did initially put in the passcode. What do you want me to do?
Either one.
Either meeting or passcode?
No, if you did the meeting, then you now have to do the passcode.
Okay. It's not doing anything.
Did you put in the meeting code?
The meeting code is right here. That's what I'm hitting now. Do I just click it on, or do I have to type it in?
You have to type in the meeting code. The numbers.
Oh, I have the number, and okay, where do you type it in? There is no place to type it in. It highlights, it gets lit up. Meeting code is all lit up.
Well, then that one you just click on. And that should take you right in.
Okay, now then the passcode.
No, you don't need a passcode if you did that one.
Okay. Nothing happens. I had gotten in, and but I did it in advance in order to be prepared. And it said, not just wait for your meeting to begin. And that's what I did. You're supposed to be doing your thing with him.
Yeah, well, that's not till 7:30. We have a couple more minutes. He's not here
Okay.
yet. I don't know what the problem is.
Well, it says there's an evening with TMC Zoom program, invite, and then a very long link.
Yes, that's the one that you just click on.
Okay. And it says under that, or.
No, forget
log
that.
in. All right, just hit that.
Right.
Okay, connecting, please wait. The meeting host will let you in soon.
Okay, I got you now. Okay, you're coming in.
Okay, what do you want me to do now?
Nothing. You're coming
I'm
in.
waiting. Okay,
Bye.
bye.
We're waiting for our speaker. Where's our speaker? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Maggie.
Okay. Oh, here he is.
Hey, Maggie.
There you
Catherine.
are. There you are.
Nice to see you.
Okay. We've got a few more people coming in. I'm letting them in, okay?
Sure.
We'll wait a few more minutes because they're gathering. You look nice and casual today.
Well, at least this evening, not earlier today, but glad to be in a sweatshirt.
Let's wait a couple more minutes. You do many of these Zoom programs?
Yeah, fair number. I mean, they're all a little different. Sometimes I guess we're all doing it, right? I mean, this is the
This is the new normal,
new normal, right?
right?
I like your background.
Ah, the world, yes. Yes, outer space. Well, it was better than my bedroom, I decided.
I'm too much of a Luddite to even know how to use those backgrounds. So you are literally seeing my bedroom.
Still have more people, I have to admit, here for a few more minutes. So multitasking is something we have to do here just for a few more minutes. It's only 7:32, so I figure we can give them 2 more minutes.
Yeah. No, certainly don't rush on my account.
Okay, I'm Maggie Klein, and this is the Manor Club Zoom meeting, and I'd like to welcome New Rochelle Mayor Noam Bramson. He is well known to many of us here at this meeting. He has served as mayor of New Rochelle since January of 2008. He was reelected 4 times by landslide margins, most recently in November of 2019. Prior to becoming mayor, he served 10 years on the New Rochelle City Council. He's going to tell us about many of the projects and programs he has spearheaded in the city of New Rochelle, and particularly all the development that is going on in downtown New Rochelle. And we hope he also discusses how the city is fighting the pandemic crisis. You all remember that New Rochelle was the first COVID case in our area. And so we are very proud to welcome the mayor, Mayor Bramson. Over to you, and we will have people submit questions via chat, and then I will read them and forward them to you. And we thank you very much. Mayor, over to you.
Well, Maggie, thanks very much for the invitation to join you. It's a pleasure for me to speak to this group. I represent a city, but we're all part of a region. And so I'm happy to have a dialogue across the border. Although I'm aware that there are plenty of people on this call who are actually New Rochelle residents, including you, Maggie, and I see Catherine White, who's the executive director of our Chamber of Commerce, and also a New Rochellean who's on the Zoom, and perhaps others as well. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity to speak with you, and glad also that you're taking questions, because I always think these kinds of discussions are much more interesting if they're a give and take rather than just a monologue. So I'll try to keep my opening comments relatively brief and efficient, and save as much time as possible for what's on your mind. And I'll stick with the 2 topics that you raised: the sort of immediate challenge, the immediate crisis of overcoming COVID, and then the longer term opportunity associated with downtown development. And then, of course, if there are other topics that the group wishes to consider, I'm happy to get into them. With respect to COVID, you're right, Maggie. Back in March of last year, New Rochelle was really an outlier. We had the unique experience of being, for a brief time, the epicenter of the COVID outbreak in the entire United States, with all the attention that flows from that. I will tell you, it was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. Maybe I may still say that even when I'm 80 or 90 years old. But I'm very proud of how the community rose to the occasion. There was no fear, there was no panic. People had an amazing outpouring of volunteerism. Our not-for-profit agencies really stepped up. And notwithstanding the fact that it was a very difficult experience for New Rochelle, particularly for those who actually had COVID or lost loved ones, I think there is a sense among many that our city faced the challenge as well as it could have, and there is perhaps a sense of pride that goes with that. Although it's difficult to feel it when we're still very much immersed in a crisis that's not over. At this point, New Rochelle is no longer an outlier. We're no longer unique in any way, and our experience tracks pretty closely with what's going on throughout the region. And I guess it's sort of a story of bad news, good news, bad news. The bad news is that over the last couple of months, the caseload has really spiked throughout the New York metro area, throughout New York State. In New Rochelle, we're back up to about 900 active cases at the moment. That's pretty close to our peak back in the spring. And there's no question it's dispiriting to backslide. Having at one point knocked it down to fewer than 20 active cases, to now be back up to 900 is deeply concerning. Now, the mortality rate and the hospitalization rate is not as high as it was back then. I think we understand the disease better. We know how to treat it better. So it doesn't have quite the same sense of dangerous intensity that it had back then. But still, we should not underestimate the degree to which we're really in a difficult circumstance with respect to COVID rates. The good news is, as we all know, the vaccine is finally here. It is safe and effective. And thank goodness we're in a position where there is light at the end of the tunnel. We can imagine a time not too distant when we'll have enough people vaccinated that this will truly be behind us, and we'll be able to get back to normal life. And look, that is a credit to the researchers and scientists who were able to develop the vaccine in record time. And thank goodness for that. And then back to the bad news. Supplies of the vaccine are nowhere close to what is required. And so we know that it's going to take quite a while for us to achieve the herd immunity, the 70 to 90% vaccination rate that's necessary to get there. So we're going to have to be patient and recognize that even for those who want a vaccine immediately, it may be difficult. And in fact, this very day, New York State opened up what they call phase 1B, which is kind of the first stage of mass vaccination because it includes anyone age 75 or older. So if you fit into that category, or if you're a first responder, or if you're an educator, be sure to go to newyork.gov/vaccine and schedule your vaccine. Your actual date may be several weeks distant, but you should go ahead and schedule it right now. And yet, even as we're dealing with constrained supplies, we also have a problem of vaccine hesitancy. There are many people who may be eligible already, but are reluctant because they have fears about the safety of the vaccine. And that's something we really do need to overcome because if too many people opt out, we will not be able to overcome COVID. And one of the reasons why the vaccination rates in the first phase, which was focused on healthcare workers, were lower than anticipated, was that a lot of people in the health sector were reluctant to get the vaccine, which I think was surprising to many people, and yet it was the reality. So we've got these sort of twin challenges that we need to overcome together. So let me move on from that. But again, if there are questions about COVID, we can certainly come back to it.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yeah, sure.
Repeat that website
Yes.
carefully.
It's newyork.gov/vaccine. And for those who are not comfortable with web portals, the state has also set up a hotline. And I am embarrassed to say I haven't memorized the number. But if you go to just about any website associated with COVID in New York, you will find it, including New Rochelle's own website, which is newrochelleny.com/coronavirus. And the hotline number is also there. Understand, because all this is just rolled out today, there's just a huge volume of calls and web inquiries that are coming in. So it can be frustrating to get through to someone at the moment. Again, that's why patience and persistence is called for. I would expect that, just as in the case of testing back in the spring, it will settle into a more efficient routine as everyone sort of gets used to how the systems ought to work. But we should be tolerant of the fact that this is a huge undertaking. And to sort of process the volume of inquiries is just an enormous logistical challenge. And it's to be expected that there might be some hiccups in the early stages. But I do know that everyone at the state who's on this task is really focused on making sure it goes as efficiently as possible.
So anyone can go to that? Anyone is eligible?
Well, no. Not anyone is eligible. To be clear, there are distinct categories. So phase 1A was primarily healthcare workers and folks in nursing homes. Phase 1B is primarily educators, first responders, and people 75 years or over. So if you do not fall into any of those professional categories, and if you're under the age of 75, at this point, you are not eligible. Now, if you go on the site, there will be a more detailed description. I'm giving you the kind of the Cliff Notes version of it. So if you're not sure, I urge you to go on the website and look at the eligible categories, and then you can determine whether you can get the vaccine or not. But certainly anyone who does fall into those categories, it is the right thing to go and schedule your vaccine just as soon as you're able.
Okay. Donna has put on the chat the telephone number 1-833-697-4829, and the website is covid19vaccine.health.newyork.gov.
Thank you for posting that. And just so you know, again, ny.gov/vaccine, which is sort of a simpler address, will get you to the same place. But certainly by posting that link, you can just click on it and you'll be right there. And I know in New Rochelle, we did a citywide robocall this morning with that information. And it's possible that Pelham has done something similar. I don't know. But I know multiple government agencies are doing what they can to get the word out so that people have the information they need to schedule their vaccine.
Okay, all right. I'll let you now go to another topic.
Sure. So let me move on to downtown development. And that prior to COVID, and I'm sure post-COVID, will be probably the biggest focus of policymaking in New Rochelle for reasons you can imagine. The health of our downtown is of enormous importance to the health and image of New Rochelle as a whole. We want to have a successful, vibrant downtown that provides a range of goods and services that are appealing to all the people in our city. We want to make sure we've got commercial tax revenue that can limit the burdens that are placed on residential taxpayers. And I think beyond those quantifiable benefits, when you live in a community, you want to feel like the heart of your community is thriving and vibrant and attractive, and a place that you enjoy visiting and are proud to have others visit. And I think it's fair to say that historically, at least since the Second World War, New Rochelle's downtown has really sort of fallen short of that standard. We've had a healthy, vibrant city as a whole, but a downtown that has often struggled. And that's certainly been true for my entire lifetime. I was born in 1969. And my earliest memory of the downtown is visiting Bloomingdale's with my mother just a few weeks before it closed. So I always sort of thought of it as a semi-depressed environment coming up, and have always wanted it to be a place that is more successful. The good news for us is that, as you can tell, if you're in New Rochelle just by looking up, and if you're in Pelham just by looking at the skyline to your east, you can see that there's been an enormous wave of investment that is at this moment transforming the downtown area. And that is very much by design. At the end of 2015, we adopted a downtown development framework with three primary components. One was a master development agreement with a group called RXR that was given an exclusive opportunity to develop publicly owned sites. The second component was something called a form-based zoning code that governs the entire 300-acre downtown. Very flexible on use and therefore market responsive, very prescriptive when it comes to design. so that we can incorporate all the best planning principles that people have gleaned over decades and kind of hardwire them into how the built environment unfolds. And the third component is a completed environmental review, which I can get more into it if you want, but the bottom line is it simplifies the approval process and reduces the risk level for investors, and therefore reduces barriers to entry for people who want to develop in New Rochelle, as long as their developments are consistent with the vision that was predefined by the city with public input. And since approval of that plan, we have now, I think, about 32 projects that have gone through our planning board and have the right to move forward. I think about a dozen are under construction at the moment, some sort of low rise to mid rise, some much more significant in their size, and several which have been completed and are leasing up. So as much as has already occurred, a lot more is going to be occurring as the projects that have been approved but have not yet commenced construction, as they begin to get going. So we have not yet felt the benefit of all this growth, because only a fraction of the population that will eventually be here has actually moved in. And the whole notion here is that you will have more on-site buying power that can create a more robust demand for a range of businesses and create that sort of street level energy that we're looking for. That's not here yet, but I think there's reason to be confident that it will be here because of the other forms of investment that are already occurring. And again, I find it very exciting. And it's meaningful regionally too, because if the New York metropolitan area as a whole is going to be successful in competing with the San Franciscos and Vancouvers and Austins of the world, we need significant growth in both jobs and residents. And if you ask corporations, what will it take to locate in an area, they will say, where are my employees going to live? How are they going to get to work? Those are the key questions. We have to be able to provide an answer, and transit-served downtowns like New Rochelle are vital to that metropolitan equation. And even though mass transit is obviously depressed right now because of COVID, we don't think that's going to be a permanent circumstance. We think that those transit systems will remain vital. And even in that sort of COVID alteration, having what they call a 15-minute city, where everything you want is within a 15-minute walk or bicycle ride, is increasingly what people are going to be looking for. And that is something we can certainly provide in New Rochelle. And even from the largest perspective, from a global perspective, if you're looking at this through an environmental lens, having living arrangements that are less car dependent, where you've got smaller square footage per capita that needs to be heated and cooled, that is a significant form of climate action. In fact, how we organize our land use is among the most significant things that municipalities can do to address climate change. So for all those reasons, I'm really excited about the direction in which we're moving. And I think it's likely that during the course of this year, the city council will probably reopen the zoning code and make some sort of mid-course adjustments. We're halfway through what was intended to be a 10-year build-out scheme. And at this point, we can look more carefully at, say, the affordable housing requirements that we impose, whether they can be strengthened in some way, whether the design elements of the zoning code can facilitate some of the sort of outdoor space that increasingly people expect, especially in the post-COVID world. We can look at whether we need to reallocate some of the square footage. For example, hotels, we know, are probably going to be lagging as we recover from COVID for the next 4 or 5 years. So we may want to reallocate some of the square footage that's now assigned for hotel space, put it into other uses. So all of that's going to be occurring this year, and I think that'll be a pretty robust discussion. But it looks good for us right now, and I'm personally thrilled about the direction in which we're moving.
So I'm here to ask some hard questions.
I'm bracing myself.
We do have a couple buildings completed.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the occupancy rate?
So I don't know the exact percentage, but I can tell you that in each case, the developers are thrilled. they are meeting or exceeding their projections. One I do know, for example, is Neuro Studios, which is marketed towards artists. And I think that was 2/3 leased up on the day it opened. The Millennia, which is right across the street from it, similar. 360 Huguenot, which is the largest of the ones that was completed. That's the RXR building. They're extremely happy, and the evidence of that is they're, moving gangbusters on their second building, which is at Church Division. The lease up has been strong, and in fact, in a perverse way, COVID has actually kind of helped us because people are, as you I'm sure have heard, are leaving the city and are looking for housing opportunities outside of New York. Now, I don't think that's going to be a permanent condition, and in the end, I think our fortunes will probably run in concert with New York City rather than in tension with New York City. But at least in the short term, COVID has actually offered sort of a boost to the suburban housing market, not just the traditional single family home market, but also the rental units in the downtown area. I know some people have the impression that, my goodness, this has got to be overbuilding. 7,000 housing units, in New Rochelle, or 10,000 housing units if we reopen the DOZ. Sorry, I'm dropping books as we're speaking. And it seems like such a huge number. And of course, in a city of 80,000, it is a big number, especially compared to, Pelham, which is like the entire population of Pelham being introduced into the 300 acres of downtown New Rochelle. But we have to remember, we're in a metropolitan area of 20 million people. And in that context, this is a drop in the bucket. And what we're offering is a very competitive, attractive housing product that is frankly more accessible to the core of Manhattan than many portions of the 5 boroughs, and a sort of an urban cultural experience at a fraction of the cost of what you'll pay in Brooklyn and Manhattan. So while I'm sure the pace of lease up and the pace of purchase will ebb and flow based on short and medium term economic conditions, I have no concerns whatsoever over the long term. And that's a judgment that's shared by the folks who are investing literally billions of dollars in these projects. They're the experts in housing trends, not that they're infallible, nobody is. And they have confidence that New Rochelle will be an attractive housing market as well.
Okay. I read in the Journal News that to get occupancy, though, they are offering a couple months rent free and other incentives.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything more about that?
No, and I imagine that's different for each building. And good. I mean, I want them to be competing for business, and that, I think that's the kind of incentive that's pretty normal. We've established a kind of a portal. If you go to ideallynewrochelle.com, and I think it's if you click on Live Here, and you'll be able to get access to each of the projects that is completed and leasing up, and learn the details, and it's kind of one-stop shopping. And there's also a sub-portal if you're eligible for an affordable unit, and it'll connect you to the Housing Action Council of the Hudson Valley, which provides assistance. So we want to make it as easy as possible for people to learn about the options in New Rochelle and to find a place that appeals to them if they want to live here.
Okay, I have a question here to read to you. What are your goals and plans for retail, especially since you're requiring retail on the ground level of each of these new buildings?
It's a good question. Let me just offer a little bit of a correction. We don't require retail at the ground level. What we require is active uses, which could include retail. It could be a gym. It could be a makerspace. It could be light manufacturing. Anything which provides that sense of energy and dynamism at the street level is fine, as long, that you need that, but it doesn't have to be retail per se. So that correction made. first, I think we have to acknowledge, and we all know this, that brick and mortar retail is very, very stressed. It was stressed before the COVID crisis because of the exponential growth of internet sales, and it's even more stressed now. And so I think the realism of attracting sort of big box retail, in the hundreds of thousands of square feet, it's not a realistic ambition for New Rochelle under foreseeable circumstances. But I think filling the smaller spaces, the smaller ground level spaces that are going to be created, that is realistic, particularly when you think about experiential based businesses, when you think about restaurants and galleries and the kinds of experiences that cannot be replicated online. I'm sometimes asked if there's kind of a model that we're aiming for. And of course, there is no perfect model because every community is different. But if you think about Mamaroneck Avenue in the village of Mamaroneck, and you think about kind of the mix of businesses that you see there, I think that is a realistic example of what New Rochelle's Main Street could evolve into over time as the downtown as a whole becomes more attractive and successful. And as you have, as I said earlier, a larger on-site population with disposable income that is prepared to support all those businesses. I'm optimistic, but we have a ways to go. And I will add, we're going to be rolling out this year incentives, not just to construct new space, but also to adaptively reuse some of the older space in the downtown. Right now, too often the financial calculation doesn't make sense for a landlord. The amount they'd have to invest to rehab their old space can't really be recouped in realistic anticipated rents. So we provide tax incentives right now for new construction, but nothing for adaptive reuse of older buildings. And we're going to try to establish a parallel program which does provide incentives of that kind. And I think at the margins, at least, that will help us fill up some of our existing vacant or underutilized commercial space.
One of our guests here would like to hear more about New Rochelle's environmental initiatives.
So we adopted, I guess now about 10 years ago, hard to believe, a sustainability plan called Greener. Actually won an award regionally, and it has sort of formed the core of our environmental initiatives since then. And there are several components. We already talked about land use, which is actually a big part of it, so I don't need to delve into that further. But to just give you some scattered examples, we've replaced all our traditional streetlights with LEDs, which are far more energy efficient and also save us money. We are working to implement over time something called complete streets, which is a different way of looking at our street network so that it facilitates mobility options, not just car dependency. A best example of that is something called the Link, which will be a repositioning of a portion of Memorial Highway into a linear park. We're using a state grant as well as applying for federal funding to implement that. And it's an illustration of what we can do in other parts of New Rochelle as we try to create a sort of more green street network, as well as creating additional open spaces, which I think is enormously important. As part of Sustainable Westchester, which is a regional entity, we are participating in a community choice aggregation program. I can't remember if Pelham Village and Pelham Manor are part of that already. But that, by the way, is probably the most significant, least known environmental initiative that's been undertaken in Westchester in the last 10 years, because by pooling all the demand of our electricity consumers, we've been able to negotiate for good, stable rates from energy providers. And the default option is a green rate, which is the purchase of hydropower. So all of our electricity for the participating communities is renewable, which is, it sort of leapfrogs over the goals that we set in our sustainability plan and really has greened the grid for the participating communities in Westchester. So that is, that's extremely meaningful. We had a bike share program, which went by the wayside because the company went out of business, but we're going to be bringing it back this year, along with electric scooters. So I think that's going to be a good step. Anyway, you get the idea. There's a lot going on. In terms of natural resources, just down the street from me, a big ecological restoration project for Beachmont Lake, which is one of the largest inland water bodies in New Rochelle. It's been decades and decades since it's been dredged. So we're restoring its water quality. And even the big investments that are going on underground in our sewer systems, that ultimately is about the health of Long Island Sound. To the extent that we have good sanitary systems and that we control inflow and infiltration from storms, that helps make sure that water quality in the Sound is protected. So a lot going on.
In general, where are the new residents for these new apartment buildings coming from?
So what I hear anecdotally, and I don't have quantitative data on this, what I hear anecdotally is it's pretty much what you would expect. It's a lot of people moving from the 5 boroughs for the reasons I cited earlier. We do have some people moving from other parts of the Hudson Valley. You do have some quantity of divorcees who, moving out of a home and relocating in a building. And we're also seeing a kind of bimodal age distribution. You got a lot of folks who are sort of younger singles and younger couples. And then you also have at the other end a lot of empty nesters. Like, for example, my mother, who is 87 years old, lives in downtown New Rochelle on the 36th floor of the Skyline building. Of course, I'm generalizing right now, but that's the general picture. And even though we were projecting a fairly low number of school-age kids coming out of these buildings, our actual lived experience is even lower. That relatively few families with school-age children, which, I actually like the idea of families coming to New Rochelle, but in terms of school district impacts, that is important because there had been concern that the new growth might overburden the school districts. We're not seeing that, at least as of now.
I should have mentioned this when you were talking about sustainable Westchester, but it's also been pointed out by Joe Marty that Pelham, the village of Pelham, is a member of Sustainable Westchester. Okay, let me get back here. I have a question here about has New Rochelle been able to get Eastchester and Scarsdale to cooperate on dealing with Lake Isle Dam?
Oh boy, is that a tough one. The short answer is no. New Rochelle is absolutely prepared to do its part and has been. We own a tiny portion of the dam, and we're willing to, participate in any partnership to stabilize it. If that can't be achieved, the lake is going to have to be drained, which is not a happy prospect for anyone who lives around it. And I have to believe that in the end, all the parties will be responsible. Scarsdale, by the way, does not abut the dam, nor do I think they have any direct role in it. Scarsdale's participation would have to deal with the Hutchinson River, which feeds into to Lake Innisfree. But they're not directly responsible for the dam. The core of the problem is the majority of the ownership is a defunct corporation that no longer exists. And so it's a very unusual circumstance. And I think probably in the end, the state is going to have to take the lead in compelling all of the parties to take certain actions. And again, New Rochelle is more than ready to do its part.
Okay, back on the developers. What key specific demands did you make of the developers for parking, for street level spaces, for design, and for energy efficiency? So
in terms of parking, there is a formula that each developer must meet in terms of number of parking spaces per dwelling unit, number of parking spaces per square footage of commercial space. There is a buyout provision that lets people, as an alternative, contribute to a public parking fund that we can use to create public parking spaces. You can also get a credit if you provide ride share services, zip cars, and things like that. So it's a flexible formula, and we want to make sure we don't overbuild parking, which is a danger as people sort of shift away from exclusive dependence on the automobile. I think we've gotten the balance right, but it's the kind of thing that you want to constantly check and calibrate as needed. And by the way, we're building a new public parking garage on Maple Avenue at the sort of eastern portion of the downtown. That's going to be incorporated into a residential development that's going up at that site. It's going to roughly double the quantity of public parking spaces that are available there, which I think will be important. In terms of ground level space, as I said earlier, the zoning code requires active uses at the ground level. We cannot compel someone to fill a space. That's a matter of finding a tenant who's willing to pay rent. But we can make sure that the space is properly configured and reserved for that purpose, and we do. In terms of energy efficiency, there is an incentive in the zoning code to achieve LEED Gold or Platinum certification. That's a measure from the Green Building, I'm forgetting now what they're called, Green Building Council, something like that. In any case, LEED Gold or Platinum certification. In the context of reopening the DOZ, which I mentioned a little while ago, we may also create incentives to use the New York State Stretch Energy Code. That's kind of a more ambitious and aggressive code than what is the base requirement. But we don't have a hard requirement to go beyond the energy code, the standard energy code. But keep in mind, just by its very nature, transit-oriented development is more energy efficient and more environmentally friendly than single-family homes at the end of a cul-de-sac far away from a train station. So I'm satisfied that what we're doing is environmentally sound. I don't know. I can't remember if I got all of the elements of that question or whether I left one out.
Catherine White wants to remind everyone that a lot of communities and developers offer promotions. Her children were offered months of free rent, free parking spaces, etc. when they moved to Norwalk. Okay, let me see here. Okay, this is a question that, why did New Rochelle permit low-income housing to be built in one place, Garden Street parking lot, instead of several locations?
Let me just acknowledge I'm not a fan of that Garden Street project. I prefer that affordable housing, workforce housing, be integrated into larger projects so that there's a blend of market rate and affordable. And in fact, the great majority of the projects that have been approved do provide affordable housing in just the fashion that I described. You have a percentage of units that are integrated into the larger development. The Garden Street project is the exception, and our zoning code did permit off-site development of affordable units, and in this case, the developer availed themselves of that option. Now, if you're an affordable housing advocate, the good news is this means we're getting more units than we would have otherwise, and we're getting them up front. And also, that Garden Street project includes a wider spectrum of price points, so that there are units with pretty deep affordability, all the way up to sort of more traditional workforce at about 80% of AMI. All that said, as we reopen our standards for the downtown this year, and look specifically at our affordable housing requirements, the recommendation from our staff is that going forward, we disallow the off-site provision of affordable units, so that in the future, the model that was used at Garden Street would probably not be allowed. And I am inclined to support that change because, as I said before, I think integrating affordable units into a larger context, I think from a social perspective, that's the best way to go.
Okay, we've been asked if you can identify by location the completed projects.
So let's see. I'll do my best. 360 Huguenots, the Print House, which is right next to Trump Plaza.
360 Huguenot is what we are familiar with is at the division of Main Street and Huguenot.
Correct. That's sort of it's very prominent as you approach New Rochelle from Pelham. Yeah.
Okay.
New
Print
Rock Studios on Burling Lane, the Millennia on Burling Lane, the Standard, which is on LeCount, right across the street from the New Rock garage. The Lombardi, I guess you could say, which is on Lower North Avenue, but that was technically completed prior to the adoption of the DOZ, but it's within the DOZ and it's fairly new. I think those are the only ones that are actually done. There are others that are beginning lease up. The Rockwell, which is on North Avenue, closer to Iona, that's starting to lease up, but I don't think there's any occupancy yet. I think they haven't quite finished the building. And of course, there's some other big ones that are in late construction. That's the first tower, Church Division, which is an RXR project. 14 LeCount, which is a Wilder Balter project, as well as L&M. That's at the corner of LeCount and Main. The Mill Creek project at the former Blessed Sacrament site, and another Wilder Balter project on Maple Avenue. That's the one that includes the garage at the ground level. And then there's a project at the corner of Center Avenue and Huguenot Street. That'll be another 28 stories at that location. I think the skeleton is probably up about to the 10th or 11th story at this point. So you can hear quite a few done, more under construction, and lots more that will begin construction this year or next year. By the way, all of that is on that website I mentioned earlier, ideallynewrochelle.com. There's a development map which lets you track every project that's approved. There's a rendering, there's basic information about its number of units and so forth. And you can kind of see its status. So we're very transparent in terms of what's going on.
Okay, I think you need to explain a little bit about the environmental part of the overall plan, because there's a question here that maybe the environmental barriers were taken away, and so there wouldn't be environmental studies necessary during the construction.
Well, so this is what I mentioned earlier. It's one of the three legs of the stool. So under New York state law, there's something called SEQR. It's the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And when you have a significant development, typically you are required to prepare something called an environmental impact statement, which is a comprehensive examination of really every aspect of the project, and not just environment as we traditionally define it, sort of air quality and water quality and energy consumption, but environment broadly defined, socioeconomic impacts, traffic, economic impacts, positive or negative, employment, all of those kinds of things. And there are good reasons to do those kinds of analyses, because when we approve significant changes in land use, we want to have a good sense of what the results will be so that we can make an intelligent judgment about whether it is or is not in the public interest. So I certainly am not critical of that. But it is a fact that environmental impact statements and the approval processes associated with them are very expensive and introduce a considerable amount of risk and uncertainty, because you go through a lengthy political approval process with a very uncertain outcome. And so very often, particularly in areas that are deemed to be economically marginal, investment is scared off by that, because they know that there's going to have to be this very, very big upfront investment, great uncertainty flowing from it, and the risk-reward ratio just doesn't pencil out for a lot of developers. So what we did in New Rochelle is take our entire build-out scheme, our entire vision for the downtown, the total square footage, the total number of units, And we went through the environmental review process for that vision in its totality. Lots of public meetings, formal public hearings, rigorous quantitative analysis. And this was, by the way, a very expensive undertaking. I think it was it's been a while, but I think it was on the order of $2 million to prepare the full environmental review and the associated zoning code. And so once having approved that, having gone through the public review, having had the political approvals from the city council, a project that fits within those four corners, that is consistent with that vision, does not have to prepare its own independent environmental impact statement. It still has to submit documentation that is specific to the project, shadow studies and so on. So it's not as though there is no review, but it is a lesser form of review. It is less costly and less rigorous and has a greater degree of certainty. And so that really does fundamentally shift the risk-reward ratio in a way that makes New Rochelle a much more attractive investment prospect. And that has been a key part of why we've been successful.
All right, I want to ask you about the schools. How was it determined what the impact would be on schools, and what was decided to offset that?
So this is something I'm quite proud of, because I think New Rochelle has probably done this better than just about any community. As I said earlier, the potential impacts of new development on our school district has historically and rightly been a subject of real concern for many residents. I'm a public school parent myself, and I don't like the idea of our schools experiencing overcrowding or having enormous new costs associated with growth in a way that might diminish the educational experience or the fiscal burdens that are placed upon current residents. So it is a legitimate line of inquiry. In order to plan for this wave of growth, the city worked hand in glove with the school district and retained a very well-regarded consulting group called WXY to do a rigorous study. And that study had a few components. First of all, we worked to develop a student generation formula that was really credible and that we could rely upon. And we took primarily our lived experience in New Rochelle with downtown projects that had already been completed, that were already mature in terms of their occupancy. And we looked at the student generation that came out of them. And we also looked at comparable developments in similar communities. And from that came up with a formula that projected what's the average number of students that will come out of a studio, a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom. And we applied all of that to the total quantity of allowable units under the plan. By the way, what that shows is that, and I don't remember the exact number, but I think it's roughly 350 kids would be produced if you get full build out. Full build out and full maturity is about 350 kids. That's in a school district with about 11,000 students. So, a sizable number, but not an order of magnitude change when you think about it spread over pre-K through 12. Beyond that, we also layered the potential build out against individual school districts for middle school and elementary school to determine whether we would actually reach tipping points that might necessitate school expansion or construction. And from that, backed into the cost of that expansion. And we created something called a fair share mitigation fund, which is something that each developer is required to pay into on a per square foot basis, which will provide the school district over time with, I think, about $9 million that they can use for any capital needs that may spring from the development. That is separate and apart from the marginal annual benefit that the school district will get, which will be very significantly positive from a fiscal perspective as a result of the development. So I think we've thought this through very, very carefully and seriously. And as I said a moment ago, it's early yet, but so far, among the buildings that have actually been occupied, we're seeing student generation rates that are even lower than projected. So that 350 estimate may end up being an overestimation, but even so, we're going to stick with it and be conservative and make sure that the school district is provided with the resources it needs and more to accommodate the growth that will occur in New Rochelle.
And what kind of revenues, tax revenues are we gonna
So
get?
just to give you kind of ballpark, and actually the figures I'm going to give you are a little bit outdated. They're a few months old. And so if I had more up-to-date numbers, they would be even more favorable. But just to give you a rough sense, if you look at all the sites where projects are currently approved, and if you project it out for the next 20 years, how much revenue would they generate in property taxes? It's about $30 million. With the development over the next 20 years, those same properties will generate about $200 million. And in the 20 years following that, when all incentives have completely phased out, they will generate about $500 million. That is a level of revenue that far exceeds whatever service costs we will incur, either from the municipal side or from the school district side. So this is a very, very big fiscal winner for New Rochelle. And, as I said, it's one of the reasons why this is important to our future.
Okay, we have a question on the status of the site of the former College of New Rochelle and its current use.
So after an auction, the campus was purchased by the Masons. They, as you probably know, are sort of a service-oriented national organization, international organization. They have a history of developing housing for seniors and so forth. And I think it's likely that they will move in that direction, although it is a large campus, which could, in theory, have multiple uses. But the bottom line is there is no specific plan at this moment. We look forward to working with the Masons to come up with a vision that's supported by the surrounding neighborhood and by the community as a whole. I think we're fortunate that the Masons chose to buy it because I think they are credible, well-resourced partners with a social mission, not just interested in the bottom line, and I'm grateful for that. But at this moment, the specific future of the campus has not been defined.
All right, New Rock. We have the movie theater gone out of business and Modell's going.
Well, movie theater temporarily closed. That's not permanent, but go ahead.
Is it temporary?
Yeah.
The whole system closed, Regal.
No, well, but at least as of now, it's not a permanent closure.
Well, Modell's is out of business.
Yes, that's true.
Well, what is the future of New Rock?
Beats me. It's a serious, I'm being flippant, but I shouldn't be flippant. It's a serious question. And New Rock is exactly the kind of facility that is most heavily impacted by COVID for reasons we can all fully understand. And I think we're going to have to wait for some of the dust to clear from the COVID experience before we know with greater confidence what New Rock's future is going to be. If the COVID impact on entertainment and sort of experience-based recreation prove to be short-term, and if people resume their old habits when COVID is behind us, then I think New Rock will, it'll get back to business. If, on the other hand, some of those changes in preferences prove to be more durable, then the center is going to need a more fundamental repositioning. And I'm being honest when I say I don't know yet, and I don't think anyone else is really in a position to know yet.
How is the plan on the New Rochelle Library? There was some talk of a building over the New Rochelle Library.
So that was always sort of conceptual. There was never a precise plan for it. And it's still possible, but it's just up to the library board of trustees. They're a separate elected body that serve as custodians and stewards for the library. My own view is that it's absolutely essential that we have a healthy, modern, successful library that has a prominent and permanent role in our downtown, not just serving traditional library functions, but also the sort of broader community and cultural functions that a modern library upholds. I don't think, however, there's any magic in this particular structure or this particular library. And so if the Library Board of Trustees concluded that there was some alternate plan that would deliver to them a library that's as good or better than the one they have today, then I think it's worth exploring. If there is no such proposal, then they should stay where they are right now. So my view is conceptually that it's worth a conversation, but I don't know at the end of the day whether in practical terms there would be an option that would be attractive to the library board.
And what is the status of expansion of the New Rochelle train station?
So there's no, I'm not sure, there's no proposed expansion of the train station. What is anticipated is that in a few years, Penn Access will link the New Haven line to Penn Station, so that from New Rochelle, you'll be able to go directly to either the east side or the west side, either Penn or Grand Central. And in fact, and I'm sorry to say this for Pelham, New Rochelle will be the closest station to the city with that dual access, because the line splits in New Rochelle just before Pelham. So that is still the plan. Obviously, the MTA has been very heavily impacted by COVID. And so all the sort of long-term capital ambitions have a little bit of a question mark hanging over them. Although I think we're too far down the road for both East Side access for the LIRR and Penn access for New Haven. I feel pretty confident that will in fact happen, even if the timetable may slip a little bit from what was initially anticipated. And that will be a big selling point for New Rochelle. It will. We already have great transit access, but this will make it that much better. But there's no, at least at this moment, there's no plan for sort of a physical expansion of the train station. We do want to enhance the southern entry to the train station, which right now is very unattractive. It's kind of just sort of dumps you out into the downtown without any sense of place. So we're going to be looking to see what we can do there. And we also created a new roadway, which actually connects the southern exit from the train station, southern entry exit, to Huguenot Street, so that as you leave, you don't sort of face the back of a building, but rather you're welcomed into the downtown. And I think that was a sensible planning move too.
Anything on Glenwood Lake, which is on the Pelham border?
Yes, some good news. Working with the Westchester Land Trust and the Glenwood Lake Association, we were able to secure what had been an abandoned private property adjacent to the lake, and that will now be integrated into the overall. It's not technically a park, but in effect, it's a park. So it's an expansion of open space at the site. And I have to say, I very much appreciate the leadership of the GLA, the Glenwood Lake Association. They're one of the most active neighborhood associations in New Rochelle, and they really have demonstrated a great sense of advocacy for the lake, as well as applying financial resources to this acquisition. And I think it's great. So I'm happy that we're able to create a long-term open space asset that can be enjoyed by people throughout New Rochelle, and visitors from Pelham are welcome to.
Well, I was thinking more about the flooding that Pelham gets.
Oh, I don't have an update on that. I'm sorry to say.
All right. Someone who just arrived, though, asks about the city gives the new developers tax breaks. How about homeowners who have lived here for so long? How about giving them a tax break?
Well, we don't give tax breaks because we like developers or out of the goodness of our heart. We do that when it's in the business interests of New Rochelle to do so, when it's in the fiscal interest of our taxpayers to do so. And the tax incentive structure that we offer is one that is necessary to attract investment. and that leaves taxpayers well ahead in terms of the revenue that flows into the city. As I indicated earlier, a huge increase in property tax revenue that will flow from these projects. So believe me, I get why on a gut level, lots of people hate these tax incentives. I don't like them either. And there is something frustrating about paying a huge property tax bill yourself and then hearing that a corporation is getting a tax break. But I do believe we have a fiduciary responsibility to make these choices in a hard-headed, business-like fashion. And without these incentives, New Rochelle would simply not be competitive. And I can tell you, we are far from the only community that's reached that conclusion. This is, frankly, it's a standard part of doing business if you want to attract the kinds of development that we're trying to create in New Rochelle.
But won't some of those new tax revenues keep your tax increases on homeowners more?
Yes. Oh, for sure. I mean, it
Have you
absolutely.
done any projections on that?
Now that I mean, I would like to. I know what the answer, the political answer I should give is, of course, your taxes will go down. I'm at the point in my public life where I feel like people just deserve the honest answer and not the appealing answer. And the truth is, every budget is a factor of so many different elements, many of which cannot be predicted in advance. And for example, I mean, we may very well see our state aid cut by 20% this year because of COVID, which is something that no one could have projected. So whether the new revenue will be sufficient to actually reduce property taxes, I don't know. No one can predict that with confidence, and I would not want to make a false promise. What I can say with certainty is that we will be much better off with the development than we would be without it. It gives us a better chance of cutting taxes, and at a minimum, will make it easier for us to support essential services and essential infrastructure investments without raising taxes to the same degree. So it's a fiscal positive for us, and we all hope that ultimately it will moderate the actual tax burden that people face.
All right, we have a question that someone wants to know about. Since New Rochelle is a city on the Sound, are you exploring a ferry system to get into Manhattan?
I love that conceptually. I don't think that New Rochelle on its own would have the wherewithal to organize and maintain a system like that. If the MTA or a regional entity wanted to create a sort of a Blueway system, or to expand the water taxis that surround Manhattan and bring them up to New Rochelle, I think that would be really thrilling. But there's no active proposal for that at the moment.
Okay, now back to the link, Memorial Highway.
Mm-hmm.
How do you foresee traffic moving between Pelham and Boston Post Road or I-95, Boston Road, I-95?
So depending on the direction in which you're going, it may be less convenient. I'll just be quite honest about that, because the proposal would, right now, if you exit southbound on I-95, you can go through that sort of that flyover over North Avenue and then loop around and get onto Lincoln Avenue, which is actually a source of concern to many people on the Lincoln Avenue corridor, because it means a huge traffic load is sort of dumped onto roads that really were not designed for that purpose. Once the link is implemented, that flyover will be closed to traffic. It'll be a pedestrian experience. And so you will instead have to divert over to Garden Street and then head into the downtown area to that North Avenue node near the train station. So if you are living in Pelham and you're trying to get from I-95 to Pelham, your trip will take a little longer. I'll be honest. I think it's well worth it in terms of the advantages associated with the link. You know, this will be the biggest creation of open space in generations in New Rochelle. And it will undo a planning error that's decades old, which had the effect of really severing a neighborhood from the downtown core and creating this overbuilt highway to nowhere. Sort of a classic, 1950s era urban renewal mistake. And you don't get many chances to undo those errors, and this is one of them. So I think the benefits of the project will far outweigh the drawbacks, but there will be a cost in terms of vehicular travel time from certain locations to other locations.
And we have a New Rochelle resident obviously asking, why are we still paying taxes on garbage, water, and library?
Well, look, the essential services and infrastructure investments have a cost. And we have a limited number of ways in which to bear that cost. And what the city government tries to do is establish a fair and reasonable balance between what we take in and what we spend. And then within the subcategory of what we take in, to distribute it among different revenue sources so that it's diversified and as fair as possible. Reasonable people can disagree about those calculations, and that's a big part of the civic discussion in any municipality and in every budget cycle. And I recognize that not everyone will agree with the choices that the city has made. It's my view that on balance, we've done this in a reasonable way, and we'll continue trying to make the best choices that we can from a fiscal and service delivery perspective.
Are you still planning to have Huguenot and Main Street two-way?
Yes. Now that is probably the most polarizing concept in New Rochelle.
Yes.
I find that people either love it or hate it.
Hate it.
I was a skeptic initially when this concept was presented to me because we've all had the experience of being in traffic jams on Main Street. And then you think, my goodness, this is going to go two-way. It's going to be a perpetual traffic jam. But then I was persuaded by the basically unanimous input of planners and traffic experts, as well as pretty detailed computer modeling that we did, that indicated it would in fact work, that it has the effect of reducing the total number of vehicle miles traveled because it enables people to get more directly to their destination. People often forget that while Main Street is somewhat constrained, Huguenot Street often has excess capacity. And the likelihood is the bus routes will be shifted from Main to Huguenot. So there are going to be a bunch of changes that will accommodate this, as well as a whole new smart traffic signalization system, which will improve and optimize the signal timing, which will help as well. And what we hear, and this comes back to discussion about retail and active uses, that it's much easier to fill up commercial space on two-way roads than on one-way roads. People like that kind of that enhanced accessibility. So, when every expert tells you the same thing, and you're a layperson like me, I think it's usually wise to listen to the experts. And I will tell you, on a 7-member city council with a wide range of views, where most of us probably started the conversation as skeptics, just like me, in the end, the vote was 7-0 to proceed with this plan. I don't recall offhand what the implementation timetable is, but I think it's probably going to be over the next 2 or 3 years. And that'll be a big change. And we all hope a positive change. And based on the information that's been presented to me, I expect a positive change.
I have a question here is, do you have any update on the natural gas moratorium?
No update. I will say that it's had less of an impact than we anticipated and feared. Basically, all developers so far have been able to identify viable alternatives to new gas hookups. Most frequently, air source heat pumps, which just are another means of doing it. So I think there was, among development advocates, there was a fear that this would bring things to a halt. That fear has not been realized. Can I just say I'm going to have to cut out at 8:45, so I just want to let you know about that. But go ahead if there are more questions.
Patsy Pizza parking lot had significant damage.
Yeah, boy, that was really a mess. This is by the municipal marina.
Yeah.
A large truck improperly made its way onto the deck, had a huge amount of damage on a deck that was already aging and needed some stabilization.
So now getting free parking on the street?
Well, we're trying to, it's a tough situation because we're trying to keep the business afloat without overburdening the neighborhoods, and we have to deal with the long-term condition of the parking deck, which is still being assessed. So I don't have at this stage a sort of a long-term plan, because there's still reconnaissance being done of the situation, but it's a sticky wicket.
Okay, well, we thank you, Mayor, for your time with us. And I would like to remind everyone that the next Manor Club Zoom meeting is next Monday night, Martin Luther King Day. We will have a Black history performer who will give us a presentation on a Black slave who was the first graduate of an American college. We thank you, Mayor, and I thank all of our 32 participants tonight.
Well, I thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure. Like, really great questions, and I appreciate that you didn't hold back. And it's good to be challenged, and I'm grateful for it. And I wish everyone a good evening. And remember, if you're eligible, sign up for your vaccine. And if you're not eligible yet, you will be soon. And let's all do our part.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.